Okay, our guest speaker for module number 6, the nutrition module, is Mike Bewley, the head strength and conditioning coach and nutritionist for the Georgia Tech men's basketball program and tennis. So, Mike, I'm coming to you because I know I'm not a nutritionist, and there are not that many strength coaches who actually have a dual background in strength and conditioning and nutrition. And so you've got a pretty unique job here at Georgia Tech working with the athletes both in the weight room, on the court, and then also kind of making sure they're fueled for performance. So what's cool about this is you get to give the students a unique perspective on what it's like dealing with the athletes and the coaches from a nutritional perspective. So anyway, welcome to the Intercollegiate Athletic Leadership Program at the University of Washington.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And we're actually here at the campus of Georgia Tech in your office. One of the questions I wanted to start with, Mike, is when you're dealing with coaches, and you've dealt with coaches not only here at Georgia Tech, but at other places you've been, Georgia Southern, Dayton, and Nevada. You've dealt with a lot of different coaches, a lot of different sports, so you've probably seen a lot of mistakes that coaches have made nutritionally when they are dealing with their athletes. So if you wouldn't mind sharing some of those mistakes and kind of what you've seen coaches do wrong when they're talking to their athletes about nutrition.
Sure, definitely. No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Dan. And I think probably the number one mistake that a lot of coaches make with athletes is they just just make a blanket conversation about a kid needs to lose weight or they need to gain weight. They don't really give them a formal plan about what it is that they need to do. How are they going to lose that weight? How are they going to gain that weight? And before you kind of go down that path, you need to have a clear understanding of what you're asking that athlete to do. And I always kind of draw the analogy is, if you say you're going to win on Friday for a football game or whatever your sport is, you're going to have a game plan. You're going to put together a whole process of how you're going to put yourself to be most successful to win. And you have to take that same approach with the nutrition. You can't just say something to a kid like, hey, you need to lose weight or you need to gain weight, and put that kid in a situation where he's going to have to make his decisions on his own, go about trying to figure out the right way to do that, and you could put him in a harmful situation.
Well, it's not dissimilar, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, we've talked in this course, first 4 modules of this quarter, we were talking about basic strength and conditioning principles. You don't just tell a kid to go get stronger.
Correct.
You tell them how. You give them the plan. You give them the roadmap, and you walk them through as best you can. And so it sounds like you're relating that concept to the nutritional side as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great analogy.
Because you do see. I mean, honestly, I've seen coaches all over the place just tell a kid, all right, you gotta cut weight. You gotta come in, 10 pounds lighter. Well, what now? What? How do I do that? Right.
Correct. Yeah.
So assuming that athletes have that understanding, I think is probably that's definitely an issue. That actually segues into the next question I had for you, which is, what are athletes doing wrong? So if a coach says, all right, well, you've got to achieve this result. Now athletes are left up to their own devices. They try to do whatever they do. What do you typically see as the mistakes or the mistakes that the athletes are making when they're dealing with their own nutrition?
Well, I can just go ahead and say they're bombarded with fad diets. I mean, they're literally no different than the average person, right? They see the magazines, they see all the things that the media puts out, and so what I see a lot of athletes assume is, in order for me to lose weight or gain muscle, I have to take this particular supplement or I have to get on this particular diet. And what they fail to realize is they're athletes, and those particular things, those are all about aesthetics. How do you look? We're in the sports realm, we're not concerned about how you look. It's how do you perform? How are you fueling your body? And inherently, that does result from all the training, and you eat correctly. It does create kind of the ideal image, but that's not what we're trying to appropriate with that. So a lot of kids, they go down that path where they're taking these, the biggest one is the paleo diet, where they're no carbs, all protein. Well, I'm sorry, the body's primary source of energy is carbohydrates, so that's going to be a problem for that athlete, just in terms of having the energy to be able to produce that. So athletes steer away from those fad diets and really take a look at exactly what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I remember a story. This is more my story than yours, so I'm going to share it anyway. I used to do. I was working with a college baseball team, and there was a pitcher, star pitcher, Friday night guy in college. That's a big deal, the Friday night guy, who decided he wanted to lose weight because he was a senior, and he was heading into spring break, he was heading into the summer, and he went on some sort of diet where he was shipped all these shakes. That's all he was allowed to eat. It was one of those really restrictive systems, which work when you just want to lose weight. That they work because they restrict your calories, and that's all you do is just drink your shakes. But he was supposed to be a pitcher. He was a Division I baseball pitcher. And he was great for 2, 3, 4 weeks. Said he felt great. He was losing weight. He still had energy, sleeping better than he'd ever slept. He was thrilled. The back half of the season, you could not have seen an athlete fade faster than we saw him fade, just because he wasn't feeling his body, and it really took a toll over time. That kind of backs up a little bit of what you're talking about.
Yeah, no question. Yeah. You're not going to find the magic pill in a drink. It's going to have to come from a balanced nutritional approach, as opposed to even I see a lot of athletes that sometimes they'll, I'm just going to get rid of this one particular food group or this one particular nutrient, and that's going to make all the difference in the world. And it's a little bit more dynamic than just that one particular thing.
Yeah, and Mike, you and I have talked before about the relationship between supplements and the macronutrient sort of foundation of the athlete diet. You talked about carbohydrates, and we're talking macronutrients. We've gone through this in this module already. It's proteins, it's fats, it's carbohydrates. So when an athlete comes to you and says, in any sport, and says, hey, I'm interested in creatine supplementation, or I'm interested in X, Y, or Z, whatever I saw that I want to do. How do you respond to that? And how do you get them to understand the importance of the macronutrients?
Well, first thing I ask them is, do you know how many calories you need per day?
What do they answer?
Well, I usually looked at me with blank stares right when I say we got another set of running. They're kind of like, oh, are you kidding me? And
right.
It's one of those deals, and I say, all right, so you don't know how many calories you need per day. You don't know what you need to be fueling, okay? All right, so I'm going to throw out on a limb, because obviously I do this profession. I can look at you. I kind of have an idea how many of those nutrients, let's say it's 3,000 calories. Let's just put it out there. Well, how many of those calories need to come from carbohydrates, proteins, and fats? And at this point, they're like, what? Like, what's a carb, coach? What's a protein? And then again, they don't understand what those macronutrient pieces are.
Right.
And I said, so what you're telling me is you don't even know if you're properly fueling your body. You can't identify what a carbohydrate, a protein, and a fat is, which are basically the building blocks of what your nutrition program should be. And you're going to go and try to use an ergogenic aid or some sort of supplementation to bolster your performance. It's not going to happen. You could put what I like to say is, you could have the best engine in the world and have all this potential in this car, but if you put really garbage, really bad gas in it, crap gas, it's not going to run right. It'll run, but it's not going to run at peak performance. And so what are we working? What are we working in the world of? We're trying to optimize peak performance. We're trying to take a kid's genetic ceiling and bring it up as high as we can to that point,
right,
and maximize that performance. So, and that's really how I kind of relate a lot of the things to the kids about the nutrition. It's like, hey, now once I kind of spark that interest with them, I say, hey, listen, now you got to treat your body like it's a sports car. Because if you had a Ferrari, would you put cheap gas in it and expect it to run right? So why are you any different? You're a highly complex machine. So you got to put the right fuels back in your body in order to meet that performance piece. So stay away from that supplementation piece. Let's get your whole nutrition in order. Let's build that body up, and then once you kind of get to that peak level of conditioning, maybe we can introduce some ergogenic benefits, some sort of supplements to kind of give you that extra boost. But that doesn't do any good to do that on a deconditioned body. When that happens, something's going to break.
Yeah. Now, Mike, I'll ask you one sort of final overall question, and then let you run. When you're talking to coaches, because you speak a lot, you're talking to other coaches about what they can do for their athletes. What is, in your mind, the best way for coaches to help their athletes from a nutritional standpoint? Because I'll tell you, everything we try to do in this course is going to be coming back to kind of that practicality. It's all right, great, nutrition's important. Now, what do I do to help my athletes?
Sure. Well, I think depending on what level you're at. Number one, if you're at the collegiate level, you have a little bit more of an ownership and responsibility to be able to work one-on-one with that athlete. If you're at the high school level, you got to take a step back and understand that you can talk to your blue in the face about nutrition, and the kid can finally understand what needs to be done. But at some point, you have to switch that gear and get mom and dad involved, because you can talk to the kid and he totally gets it. But mom and dad are the ones still going to the grocery store, still buying the food, still putting the food in the cupboards and putting it on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't have an understanding of what Johnny or Susie needs, then you're going to kind of be spinning your wheels. So it really just comes down to kind of educating yourself. So if you're going to ask an athlete to lose weight or gain weight, you need to kind of have a systematic approach in place that says, if I'm going to say those things, I'm going to be able to have the resources to give my athlete the guidance that they need to be successful, and to put them in a situation where they're going to be safe. And then again, at the high school level, you know what, there may be other factors or other people that I need to get involved with this, so that they can be the most successful that they could possibly be with their health and nutrition.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, to follow up on that point, Mike, is coaches all know the environment that they're operating in a lot better than we do,
No
right?
question.
So any coach who's out there is thinking about what I can do for my athletes. Your dining halls, the food options that are within, say a quarter mile of campus where athletes are most likely going to be getting their nutrition. And basically just giving the athletes sort of the tools so that they can understand. All right, look, if you're going to go to, we've talked about Chipotle before. I'm a big Chipotle fan. Jimmy John's another one that I like. If you're going to go to one of these places, these are the types of foods that you may want to be looking at based off of what you need. I think those things can really help a kid, because when your friends are all going to go to McDonald's, you don't want to say, well, I can't go to McDonald's because I'm supposed to eat better. Now, you want to go hang out with your friends. If they're all going to McDonald's, you got to have some sort of choices in mind. So I would say that'd be another piece.
Yeah, no question. It's a really good point that you talk about with that too. It's one of the things we do with the kids is we find all the local restaurants,
mm-hmm.
and we give them menu options that are healthier menu options, because life happens, right? You're still going to be a student. You're still going to be an athlete. You're still going to go do those things, and nutrition is, as I say, you can still indulge yourself. You should be eating pretty good for about 85% of the time,
yep.
And the other 25%, you know what? Enjoy yourself. Because life is going to happen. You can't be so regimented in your nutrition. I think that's a big mystery a lot of my athletes get. When you start talking about nutrition, a lot of kids are like, well, man, I'm going to have to eat chicken breast and steamed broccoli. No, it doesn't have to be that way. You can eat foods that you like. It's all about portion control. It's all about managing, and that's even another segue to we could even talk about is learning athletes have an understanding of what they're actually putting on their plate. What's a healthy portion size versus what is, the heaping of food that mom puts on your plate. The whole deal. So that's an excellent point. In terms of, and that's another resources that coaches can use to help athletes make better informed decisions, where they can still go to those places and make healthier choices, but tell them, say, it's okay too, to go ahead and indulge yourself, but don't overindulge.
Well, you can set that standard too if you're on the road with your athletes, right? You've got choices about meals that you go get. You can make choices based off of what you understand to be quality nutrition for the athletes, kind of setting the standard. Hey, this is how you can eat when you go to these places, and these are the meals that we think are, or the food that we think are most appropriate for you. So that's a good opportunity to kind of have that impact with kids. And you told me, Mike, I promised I'd let you off with that last question, but I'm going to follow with another one. This is classic.
Not a problem. Go ahead.
This is classic me. But you told me a story recently about kind of trying to change the culture of nutrition on a team. I'd love for you to share that, if you don't mind, with the coaches, just because I think that's a great story about ways that you can take a soft approach and still get a really successful kind of turnaround from a team culture around their eating.
No, that's one of the things I think when you start talking about nutrition, we're not really trying to teach kids nutrition. And don't get me wrong, you are, but what you're trying to appropriate is a behavioral change. That's the number one thing. And that's going to start with a culture. You have to kind of create that culture. It's no different than you coming and inheriting a team that doesn't have a sense of winning. You have to instill that winning sense in them.
Right.
Nutrition's the same piece. So when I got to Dayton, we had an average weight loss of 12 pounds in the season. That was an average. I had some kids.
Which is bad, we're talking about. It's
clear. Really, really bad.
Yeah, so a lot of times we talk about weight gain, and that's not so good. But
weight loss in season, obviously, I don't want to see an athlete lose any more than 2 to 3 pounds. And we monitor that through a series of different ways. But I knew immediately there was a nutritional problem there. There was something that was disconjointed with that. So what I ended up doing was, instead of me being a new guy, of which I have no relationship, I'm just going to be some guy telling them about how important nutrition was, I looked at the local restaurants, but also I noticed what the kids were bringing in. We had a Wendy's and we had a McDonald's right by the arena.
Yep.
So the kids were stopping off in there and bringing in, so whether they're getting taped, when they're hanging out in the locker room, they're eating. And so I just took it upon myself to create healthier menu choice options and just set that on a piece of paper, just put it out there, and I put it on their locker, and I sat back and watched the kids who intrinsically were self-motivated and made those decisions. And I took that at that point and said, okay, I went up and said, hey, I noticed you changed your stuff. Yeah, man, I want to be able to eat better. And I said, well, I know what, I'm a certified nutritionist. I can help you with nutrition if you'd like. And lo and behold, out of, it's only 3 guys. But what ended up happening was when those guys started adopting that nutrition habit and pairing it with good rest, good training, good conditioning, their bodies completely changed in comparison to their peers. And all their peers were like, what in the heck are you doing? Coach, man, he's got me on this diet program. And so that's kind of a great way to do a soft introduction to it and to get kids and maybe really kind of find your kids that can be more of your disciples, so to speak, in terms of starting to develop that culture. And you can't get in a hurry with nutrition. That's the one thing you can't, because when I get them, they're 18 years of bad habits. So I gotta be realistic. I have to. These kids have to have kind of create a self-discovery in all this process. But more importantly, I try to identify kids that have that want to and use that to build that culture, and eventually it just becomes part of your program. And I'll leave you with this last comment. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I plan on eating like crap today. They just don't. They just don't know. And you as a coach have a really unique opportunity to really make an impact on that kid's life, not only from a leadership standpoint and in the weight room, but just health and wellness wise. And that's the neat thing is when you give them that and empower them in that way, not only from a performance standpoint, but that's something they get to take with them for the rest of their lives. And that's really impactful, and that's another kind of a feather in your cap that you can have as a coach and really start impacting these kids' lives. So that's why I really like the nutrition piece. It complements everything I do, but it really